across Ireland. This is the IMRO Radio Awards National Station of the Year. This is News Talk.
It's 7 o'clock. Good evening, I'm Adrian Harman. There's been a further 93 COVID-19 deaths, the highest daily figure since the start of the pandemic. The previous record was 77 deaths recorded on April 20th last year. An additional 2,001 new cases have also been confirmed this evening. The number of people in hospital now stands at 1,949, while 202 people are in intensive care units. Professor Emer Shelley from the Royal College of Physicians says today's death toll is not surprising.
The cases occur and the hospitalisations and people in ICU, and some of those don't survive. So there are also outbreaks in long stay facilities, and I expect some of the deaths unfortunately have probably been in those and in nursing homes.
Two women are suing Conor McGregor in separate personal injury claims, the details of which have not yet been made public. The 32-year-old UFC fighter is one of two men listed as defendants in papers filed to the High Court in Dublin yesterday. No charges were brought in relation to those allegations, and our courts correspondent Frank Graney says McGregor intends to fully defend this action.
In a statement provided to us this evening, Karen J. Kessler, a spokesperson for Conor McGregor, said the following. After an exhaustive investigation conducted by the Gardaí, which, in addition to interviews of the plaintiff, included interviewing numerous sources, obtaining witnesses' statements, examining closed-circuit footage and the cooperation of Conor McGregor, these allegations were categorically rejected. She went on to say the plaintiff knows the facts contradict the assertions in this lawsuit. Mr McGregor will dispute any claims and is confident that justice will prevail.
Ireland will need to have 70% of the population vaccinated against coronavirus by the summer under new EU targets. It's also called on member states to ensure 80% of over 80s and 80% of healthcare workers are protected by March. And finally, the process of reopening special schools this week has been a series of mixed messages and U-turns. That's according to a joint statement by four leading advocacy groups, which say children with special needs have been almost completely forgotten in the row between unions and the Department of Education. That's it for now. More in an hour.
For our most competitive van insurance, go to the aa.ie.
Rain in many areas tonight, turning to sleet or snow at times over Ulster. Mild in the south for much of the night, but colder in the north with lowest temperatures of 0 to 4 degrees. And now you're up to date on News Talk.
The Newsround on Off the Ball.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters.
This is News Talk.
Hello there, you're very welcome along. So it's a Tuesday evening here on Off the Ball and we are busy. We will unpack the frankly extraordinary details in the written judgment of the Charles Burns case. Cheltenham Festival winning trainer has been banned from the sport for 6 months. He is appealing the case, but we'll talk about the written judgment this hour. Paul Murphy then, Kilkenny hurler, 4 All-Irelands in the past decade, has retired. Really good chat coming up. Spoke to him just before coming on air about hurling and family, and it's well worth sticking around for after 8 o'clock. Dan McDonnell will be on the football show, the legacy of Wayne Rooney to be discussed, and Susan Rack of The Guardian will tell us about the Phil Neville era. In charge of the England women's team, he's obviously off to Inter Miami now. Tepid and too much arrogance was the headline in her piece. So we'll talk to Susan on the football show. 53106, the text number. We're at Off the Ball on Twitter. Richie McCormack, hello.
Hey Joe, you well?
Very well, thank you. Dan McDonnell, how you doing?
Evening Joe, Richie.
Great to have you with us. So this hour, Dan, will be talking to the Irish editor of the Racing Post, Richard Forstall, about the Charles Burns case. And I know you were tweeting about the written judgment earlier on, so you've had a reasonable look at it. And I know you're somebody who enjoys your racing. Some of the detail within is extraordinary.
It's pretty incredible, yeah. I mean, there's no there's no way of sugarcoating that description. You're talking about sort of a very noteworthy ban for a very noteworthy figure within the sport, and a very detailed, as you alluded to, a very detailed description of the case and the details behind it. And I mean, you might have it in front of you. I don't quite have it physically in front of me, but I think like the very basic point that you have a dangerous level of sedation was a phrase that was used. That you had a horse going out to run in a race, that was basically heavily sedated. And that's what the testing duly found. And obviously there's a whole process to explain how this happened and talk of unidentified third parties. But I mean, just that basic fact alone, that you had a horse on a track in a jumps race in that condition, naturally has the potential to damage other people, and that's really the shocking aspect of it. I mean, there's obviously other details that people will unpick, and you will unpick, I'm sure, with Richie and in more detail. But that very, for someone listening to this who's not interested in racing, that type of detail is the thing that jumps off the page.
Well, it exposes, just the many options in racing. If you have a mind to cheat to make money, you can do that by winning. And then, unlike a lot of sports, you can most certainly do it by losing as well if you're on the inside track. So what's happened here is Charles Burns, trainer, who is appealing, by the way, this decision, has been banned for 6 months, fined €1,000. All goes back to October 2018 at Tramore Racecourse. His horse, Viking Horde, tested positive for a sedative. So what had happened in the race, according to the written judgment today, is that the gelding ran conspicuously badly, they say, received a reminder from the rider immediately after jumping the first hurdle. It became rapidly detached from the rest of the field and was pulled up before the 7th hurdle. So positive tests came back for the sedative. Charles Burns, the trainer, requested a B sample, which happened in France. The A sample tested in UK. Both were positive. In fact, the concentration of the substance in Viking Horde system was 100 times the legal limit. And as you say, Dan, the written judgment in the case says the horse was subject to a dangerous degree of sedation during the race. It put the safety of the horse, the rider and the other horses all at risk. Betting patterns then came into the equation. So on that morning, October 2018, if you were interested in putting a bet on the race, Viking Horde started the day at 4-1. But by the time the race came around, it was at a starting price of 8-1. And there were some substantial bets being placed on the horse to lose. One wager, for instance, €34,889 was put down to win €3,200. And there were other betting patterns in other races concerning Viking Horde as well from 2018, which we'll get on to later on with Richard Forstall. Now, in effect, the committee here are absolutely certain that the horse was nobbled, for want of a more technical term. What they do concede, though, is that, and they say themselves, there's no direct evidence of who administered a prohibited substance. And they say direct evidence of administration will rarely be available for obvious reasons. And so a finding against a licensed trainer of such misconduct would inevitably be followed by a lengthy or permanent withdrawal of license. It could also attract criminal investigation and or liability. So they said that suspicion, no matter how strong, is not evidence for this purpose. There's different, obviously, burdens of proof, and there's balance of probability, but when potentially you're going to make a criminal accusation, then the burden of proof goes much higher. So what they do say is they are certain of his neglect in supervising the gelding, and that may have allowed the opportunity for a third party to come along and give the horse the sedative. So it's all, extraordinary. They reference other betting patterns on Viking Horde at different times. So in Tramore, that race I mentioned, just over 34 grand to win 3 grand. The horse ran in Sedgefield in October as well. There was €30,279 placed on the horse to lose for a return of €12,000, and it went from 3-1 to 10-1 that day. Galway in July, 55 grand placed to win 12 grand. It went from 4-1 to 8-1. Samples were taken after those races at Sedgefield and Galway, and there was nothing untoward there. So Dan, I used to be very fond of a Dick Francis novel back in the day, strange teenager that I was, and this wouldn't pass the Dick Francis test because, talk about a blunt instrument. 100 times the level, and the betting patterns, could, whatever was going on here, the people involved, could they have tried any harder to get caught?
So that's, and isn't there a line there about it being traced to a particular account as well?
That, yeah.
like an overseas account?
Yes.
Maybe give that detail.
Yeah, maybe that's an important point to make, to be fair. There is no evidence, I should stress that, there is no evidence linking the trainer, Charles Burns, with the betting patterns. So what they say of those bets is that there seems to have been a third party. So the bet was, they say, initially placed with a limited liability company, which then placed them in turn with Betfair. Now, even the people here behind the report say they're surprised this is allowed because it makes it difficult to trace the beneficiaries. But the IHRB Deputy Head of Security, Declan Buckley, identified an individual known to be associated with the account as being associated with match fixing with other sports and is located somewhere else in the world. So, but they do say there's no evidence linking Burns with the betting patterns, but the betting patterns are most certainly there nonetheless.
Yeah, and I mean, listen, as someone who's probably, in my job has covered football and stories around sort of match fixing and overseas accounts and stuff, it's a sort of a shady area. And as you say, like, to speak very generally here, right? To speak very generally, that it's the detail, because there's a whole vernacular around horse racing. Like, people who follow horse racing every day, I suppose, know the sport. Like, you would like to think that every day, that every horse in every race is 100% trying to win that day. But people who sort of follow the sport, people who know how the handicapping system works, there's always an awareness, there's a nod and a wink, there's a sort of a conscious belief that, some horses are waiting for another day sometimes. And there's always that there's that awareness around the sport. You might see a horse, he might be running over the wrong distance, or he mightn't be 100% fit, and there's always another day coming down the road perhaps. And everyone is aware of it. People can't really, bluntly say it, but people at the racetrack will know. They'll see a quiet run and expect some horse to come back someday, and that is part of the game, whether people like it or not. When you have a handicapping system and you have that, you will always have that there. And you will have in Ireland, I think, a feeling sometimes that even like there isn't enough application of, say, non-trier rules, that you will have particular races that are run, at a given time, at a given weekend, where people who know the sport will be watching a race like a maiden hurdle and they're thinking, well, yeah, some of those horses are out for educational runs, okay? And that is part of the sport, right? But this is sort of another level of that, as you say. There's a sort of a bluntness of instrument here in terms of by this unidentified third party, and whatever tactic was employed here, it feels to have an impact on this horse's performance in the race, 100 times over the particular limit. I mean, it's as you say, the Dick Francis novel stuff. It's sort of crying out to get caught, really, to some degree. And probably, I don't have the figures off the top of my head. I don't know what level of testing is done on a regular basis of horses that get pulled up or run badly. You'll see a trainer called in. You can read the reports after a race. If there's a horse that runs particularly badly, a trainer will be called in to explain it. But I don't know if all of those horses are ever actually tested. So, like, this, unfortunately, for the image of racing, ties in, and again, I'm speaking very generally again here, ties in with a sort of a period of a couple of months where there's been a lot of scrutiny of the practices employed, the disciplinary procedures, and how sort of Irish racing operates. You had a situation a couple of months back where Jim Bulger, one of the most respected and is a flat trainer, so this was, this is a jumps case, but is a flat trainer who's one of the most respected figures, the most senior figures in the game, saying openly that he doesn't believe that there's a level playing field. And he's talking about sort of maybe alluding to the horses that are winning, not a very different case to this one here. But the general point, again, that he's suggesting that there's things wrong. We've had in recent weeks, we've seen Paul Kimmage articles in the Sunday Independent covering cases. And it just appears that overall this is tying into a general theme, again, of what is happening with Irish racing. And that should be of concern. Like, the specifics of this case, we will see how this plays out in due course. But I suppose the broader perception of how it looks to a public who may not follow it but it might fuel certain suspicions they might have about the sport, and that's obviously very problematic for people.
Yes, Stan, I would put it to you that the public perception of Irish horse racing or horse racing generally is terrible when it comes to integrity.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly, I don't know, is it, I mean, like, is there a lot of people who every day just follow the race and don't care about those things, like who will follow the moves and happily, follow the market sometimes and profit accordingly without giving a second thought? Maybe so. Like, I don't know. Okay, bookies aren't open at the moment in the way they would be, but I don't know if we weren't in the pandemic and if bookies were open in the way they normally were, would people be going in tomorrow feeling any less comfortable about doing so? Like, I don't know if that's the case. But certainly there just seems like there's been a sort of a confluence of events in recent months where all of a sudden there's a lot more scrutiny on it generally. But there's sort of layers to that. But just there's a sort of, as I said, there's a bluntness to this case, and the details about this particular account that's been identified. And like, as I said, for as you mentioned, the issue with Charles Burns that he's been in the dock for relates to sort of that degree of neglect, as you mentioned. I can't think what the specific word you mentioned, but not being present with the horse. But like, just to explain from the outside, like, this is someone who's a very big name within the sport. Charles Burns is trained, Solwith has trained some very big winners. He would be someone that would be probably associated with sort of, landing some very big winners, landing a touch, as people would say. If people see a Charles Byrne horse backed, people jump up and take notice, Right. So he's a well-known name within the sport. So obviously, and this is a very serious case, but as I mentioned, there's obviously layers to it, and appeal, and there's obviously a road to travel in terms, I suppose, of uncovering the full story, perhaps. There is, and Charles Burns has said he will be appealing the findings and the case. That was pretty much all he said. The Newsround on Off the Ball on News Talk is with thanks to Gillette. We don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette made it what matters. Richie, we've got live sport this evening.
Yeah, plenty of it as well. They're well into the second half. In the first of tonight's two Premier League games, it's West Ham versus West Brom at the London Stadium. Jarrod Bowen gave the hosts the lead in first half injury time, but we've had an equaliser in the past couple of moments, as Guy Swindles can tell us about.
West Ham 1, West Bromwich Albion 1. Thumping equaliser from Mateus Pereira. He moved forward and the West Ham defence just backed off. He got to the edge of the box and struck a thunderous left foot shot across Fabianski that he had no chance of keeping out. VAR did look at a possible offside. Gallagher was standing offside, but not in the way of the West Ham goalkeeper. And what a way to equalise. West Ham 1, West Brom 1.
Elsewhere, Leicester can go top of the Premier League table tonight. Brendan Rodgers' side entertain Chelsea from 8:15. Teams just in for this one. Kasper Schmeichel starts in goal for Leicester with Timothy Castagne, Wesley Fofana, Johnny Evans and James Justin at the back. In midfield, then Wilfred Ndidi, Yuri Tielemans and Mark Albrighton, with James Maddison in support of Harvey Barnes and Jamie Vardy. For Chelsea, Edouard Mendy starts in goal. Back four then of Reece James, Antonio Rudiger, Thiago Silva and Ben Chilwell. Mason Mount, Mateo Kovacic and Kai Havertz are in midfield, while Callum Hudson-Odoi and Tammy Abraham are up alongside Christian Pulisic in a front three. Leicester boss Rodgers is enjoying a multi-pronged title race.
Well, naturally, it's exciting. I think that everyone wants to see and feel the competition, and like you say, the points between everyone is all very, very close. At the top and towards the bottom of the league. But like I say, we're nearly at the halfway stage yet, which tells you everything. We don't get too carried away at this stage. Still so many games to go. But thankfully we've been in a good consistent run of form. But as I say, and I repeat, that whatever form you're in, that doesn't really matter. You have to have a hunger and a desire, and that's something that thankfully my players show every single day. And because they're so young, they want to develop and improve. So something that we will reinforce. We have to continue with that mindset.
And finally, among tonight's games, a home tie with Arsenal awaits the winners of tonight's rearranged FA Cup third round tie at St Mary's, where Southampton face Shrewsbury from 8 p.m.
So Conor Hourihane then, Richie's on the move.
He is indeed. He's going to join Swansea City on loan from Aston Villa. The Corkman has fallen out of favour with the Premier League club. Last featured in late November, he's only got 4 Premier League appearances to his name so far this season. For their part, Swansea, just to give a flavour of where they are, they're currently second in the Championship table. Elsewhere, Richard Keogh today returned to the Championship with a move from MK Dons to Huddersfield. It's the former Ireland defender's second spell with the club, and a move that's been facilitated by Warren O'Hora's permanent signing with the Dons.
It did happen very quickly, but like I said, football moves very quickly, and just delighted to be here again, and just really excited to be at a club where obviously the model and everything that's going on here is going to be enjoyable for me, but also something I couldn't really turn down.
Is this
he's not the only Irish international on the move.
Sorry, Rich, apologies. Is this Richard Keogh? This is his first time getting back playing football post the car accident, is it, or no? Has he been playing away?
No, he went to MK Dons and they sort of took a chance on him, and he's rebuilt his, he not rebuilt his reputation, but he's pretty proven that he still retains his ability.
Okay.
But so he's been playing at League One level, but it's still come a small bit out of the blue that all of a sudden, not all of a sudden, but that I suppose the feeling was he was staying there, but he's managed to get himself back, as Rich says, to the Championship level now. I mean, I suppose in some respects it makes sense that before the accident, like, he was one of the, probably regarded as one of the better centre halves in the Championship, or certainly a very experienced one. And clearly Huddersfield have been doing their business, and once they see that he's fit, they probably see he's playing a level below where he can play.
Yeah, good for him. That was a miserable turn in his life, so good to see him back in the Championship. 34 years of old now, or 34 years of age now, Richard Keogh. Conor Masterson, you were saying, Richie?
Moving in the other direction, he has joined Swindon Town, who are currently managed by John Sheridan. He's going on loan from QPR. While Diane Caldwell has signed for North Carolina Courage. The Republic of Ireland defender has spent the last 4.5 years at German side SC Sant, where she was captain. Caldwell will play alongside her international colleague Denise O'Sullivan with the Courage.
Now, you guys were saying last night, you and Nathan, that there was, or you and Adrian, excuse me, that there was going to be an investigation into the challenge which injured Breed Stack. So that's happened quite quickly, it would seem.
Yeah, a tribunal is what we heard yesterday, and indeed that came to fruition overnight. Ebony Marinoff handed a 3-game ban for the challenge that injured Breed Stack. The 11-time All-Ireland winner with Cork suffered a fracture of the C7 vertebra while making her debut for Greater Western Sydney Giants in a practice game against Adelaide Crows at the weekend. Marinoff was brought before an AFLW tribunal and pleaded not guilty. However, she was found to be culpable of engaging what they call forceful front-on contact.
Do you know, it's interesting, because I was expecting something quite bad when you heard there was an investigation into this injury which had resulted in a fracture of a vertebrae, and then the first time I saw it I thought that, well, there's nothing in that. Like, completely,
it looked really innocuous. Yeah,
completely innocuous. Yeah, totally agree. And it was, you know, if you haven't seen it, I mean, it's the equivalent in GAA of somebody going down to pick up the ball and somebody coming in, and I guess their midriff hitting the head of the person going down to pick up the ball. And I guess it's only when you watch the incident in the context of knowing what happened to Stack is that you realise it's actually quite an exposed, vulnerable position when your head's down like that, if you're going to get contact from, well, as they say here, front on. You know, you can suddenly see how that would be quite dangerous. And it had never really occurred to me in all the years of playing or even watching Gaelic football that moment where you're going to pick up a ball, if somebody runs right into your head, you know, something very, very serious could happen. It doesn't tend, Rich, to happen that much in GAA. Like, you don't tend to see someone going down to pick up the ball and another person crashing into their head. So thankfully we haven't seen these kind of injuries.
There could be a degree of, I don't know, they're similar sports, but she was still obviously finding her feet very much so in Aussie rules. But it's something that does happen in rugby. I mean, how many times have you seen a player going down to collect the ball and somebody has ploughed into their head, be it with a knee or a thigh or a hip or even their midriff? Has happened here between Marinoff and Stack. So it is something that can happen. But yeah, like you, I was expecting something far more vicious, let's say, and probably intentional when the clip first surfaced, and instead I got greeted with this sight of what looked like a fairly innocuous challenge, but it shows the danger of playing a game like that, whereby something like that can happen quite easily. You couple that with hard summer ground down in Australia as well. It's not easy on the old back.
We are very vulnerable. Did you see it, Dan?
No, I did, yeah. And I my first view would have been similar to yours, and I was wondering had it developed, like, you know, across the day as such, that to come around to the view, well, actually, no, this punishment was justified. I suppose it does make you think, like, was it unusual? Because if people are vulnerable in that position why doesn't it happen more often, if you know what I mean, that type of injury isn't sustained? So is there a sort of a code that you don't go in that situation in that way? But I don't know. I didn't look much in it to me at first, and I did think, is it one of those where the injury has dictated the punishment, which can happen in a lot of sports, as we've seen even with leg breakers in the past, in football or whatever, that there's a desire to punish because of the consequences. But I don't know. I mean, it seems like there's more layers to it than that.
Richie, we'll skip ahead to Connacht then. Some news on Bundy Aki and Andy Friend.
Yeah, good news on both fronts. Bundy Aki looks set to be fit for the start of Ireland's Six Nations campaign. Connacht head coach Andy Friend says the centre could even feature in this Sunday's Pro 14 meeting with the Ospreys. He's been out since last month with a knee injury. However, fellow centre Sammy Arnold has been ruled out of action until April. That's due to a chest muscle injury. Meanwhile, Friend says he's held really positive contract talks with CEO Willie Ruan about extending his current deal, which expires in the summer. Another goal to tell you about, meanwhile, at the London Stadium, West Ham taking on West Brom. Here's Guy Swindles.
West Ham 2, West Brom 0. West Brom equalised just 5 minutes into this second half, but the Hammers have taken the lead again through Michail Antonio. Second goal in 4 days at the London Stadium. Nice cross from the left-hand side from Cresswell. It was nodded back by substitute Yarmolenko, and on the ground almost, it was a super finish from that man Antonio. West Ham 2, West Brom 1.
Forget Charles Burns. I'd be more worried about Joe and his passion for Dick Francis novels and VHS tapes of Riverdance. There needs to be an intervention, says Owen. How do you remember the Riverdance thing? Oh my God, that's going back a long way. I was just a kid then, all right?
What's the Riverdance thing?
I think on the back of the Eurovision bonanza that was, I asked Santa Claus for a VHS of Riverdance.
Oh yeah, I remember this. Yeah.
Look, you're just a kid. On the Dick Francis front,
you would have been around 15, surely, Joe, at the time.
No, come on now. Dick Francis, my grandparents had some horses. They had some Dick Francis novels lying around, one or two of them, and I read them both as a teenager, and I just kept reading them. I just kept going to the library. There's about 50 of them. So we've done the whole collection, Dan. They're perfectly good, by the way.
Listen, my dad's a big fan of them, So, like, they're in that genre, yeah.
Absolutely. Richie, we have to take a break. We're done. So thank you for this evening.
No worries.
Dan McDonnell, you're back on the football show. You're with us for the full hour between 9 and 10. We'll be talking various things, including you're going to assess Wayne Rooney's playing legacy for us, and I'm going to pick holes in whichever argument you take. So we'll talk to you after 9 o'clock. Thank you.
Okay.
We'll take a short ad break, and then we're talking about this Charles Burns case with Richie Forstall of the Racing Post. And